Welcome everybody to another episode. We have really exciting guest, my good friend Raj. He leads product, or you could tell us like your exact role, Microsoft Copilot, and also Sarah here. And we just kind of wanted to bring him on and kind of shoot the shit. So I don't know if you want to give a intro about yourself, Raj. How did you end up at a big, huge, ginormous corporation that
Company?
probably sucks like Microsoft?
Well, it was funny because I actually joined Microsoft, not necessarily through an acquisition, but kind of through an acquisition. So there's a smaller company called Bonsai that Microsoft acquired, and Bonsai was basically very focused on deep reinforcement learning for autonomous systems, autonomous robotics, and that kind of thing. And um, Satya Sun actually does a pretty good job of, okay, we're going to bring you on and you
Yeah,
guys are going to do your own thing and you need to make it a big business because we're Microsoft and that makes total sense. Right. And you have all the power of this fully operational battle station, do something about it.
right.
Um, but s- uh, LLMs, right. And priorities change. And so I was, I moved deeper into the unit, as they say. And so now I'm part of Azure Data. I lead Copilot's and OpenAI strategy for data and science and data engineering as part of what's known as Microsoft Fabric, which is a
Huh.
SaaS kind of all you can eat uh, data platform. So think like Snowflake, Databricks, very
Got
similar
it.
type of capabilities and offerings. And so, yeah, there's Copilot stuff and Copilot things. Uh, and yeah, I mean, I will say, I've done this a couple of times now where, I've been a part of like a smaller organization inside of a large organization that's
Yeah,
been independent.
yeah,
There's pluses and minuses. Obviously, I've been part of startups, right? And
yeah.
I've seen kind of all sides of the equation now. Um, it's not, I think for founders specifically, right? And actually, this is something I talked a lot with about the founders of Bonsai, right? When you get swallowed into a large organization, there's a lot of stuff that happens,
Right.
and you could kind of, hit the runway and hit it out of the park. But by necessity, a lot of those priorities change, and that happens all the way down and trickling into your roadmaps and that kind of thing. And so, having that kind of autonomy inside of a large organization as part of a small one balances out some of the, you know, parts of being part of the larger bureaucracy, I would say.
Right.
Um, but nevertheless, it's a nice place to work. Some people that I meet are a lot of the people I meet, honestly, I will say, are like just kind of blow my mind,
Right.
and that's part of the benefit of being, in the larger org. Um, I will say, I have never seen ticketing systems as complex as the ones that I've seen. So, that means that's that's I guess another benefit. So anyway, that's my
Wow.
story.
So what do you like, what is your focus now for like the layman out there who may not be AI connoisseurs?
Yeah. Well, that's actually a good question. Um, so I think, a lot of people use Microsoft products, right? I mean, there are very few people that haven't, to be
Yes.
very candid, right? If you're listening to this podcast, you use Microsoft products. Sorry, Um, and I think, you know, the advent of Copilot experiences has in many ways accelerated productivity. And I think there was a huge push a few years ago. And something I
So
actually
for
talked about. Go ahead.
just to step in. So Copilot obviously is for people to help them code mostly. So it'll plug into your IDE. I was just talking to our tech people, and what do you guys use Copilot for? And then they're like,
Yeah.
well, we plug it into JetBrains, which is an IDE, and
Right.
it'll help you like autocomplete code, and you could also help ask it to like actually create code from scratch and all those different types of things. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where it kind of fits in. Where I see like the broad there's also like Claude, which I think is, you guys may even use them, but I see that as like, I actually use that myself. I'm like, hey, like, code me up this thing, and it'll just like tell me to like the exact files and how to compile them and what to do. And it's not necessarily like inside of like an IDE and all that. And I know that's kind of what Copilot
Kind of like
kind of
sits
does.
adjacent a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
little more adjacent. And then you
Yeah.
have like your replets or your cursors that are trying to, hey, build me this thing. I don't
Right.
even want to know about the code. I just
Right.
want the actual end product. So like
Right.
where do you today, where do you see Copilot
Well,
or just the entire or like kind of like
yeah,
landscape?
totally. Well, so that actually is, there's this whole kind of organization at Microsoft that's been there for a long time, the developer division, right? And, GitHub today, which, sits and is very, very, basically inside of the developer division. They're the ones who kind of like came up with the whole, actually, it was, one of my colleagues from a long lifetime ago who actually sort of pioneered it
Yeah.
with his team called, his name is Idan Gazit, excellent, incredible speaker. He's kind of on the forefront of like, what does developer experience look like? What does it actually mean in the context of AI? What are we doing next? Like, and so he just had, he has a few talks out there that are actually absolutely worth listening to in that context.
Yeah.
Copilot today at Microsoft is actually much more. So as an example, right? If you're using Microsoft Word, there's a Copilot button and you can provide a prompt and Microsoft Word will spit out like a multi-page document about whatever that prompt is.
Oh, wow.
And you can reference files. You can, have it like search, the internet. You can have Copilot create PowerPoint slides. You can have, Copilot as a part of your security, help identify threats. Like there is a Copilot experience now inside of almost every Microsoft product. I'm saying that because, there's several now,
Yeah.
right? And actually, Sarah, so your question is interesting because, one of the things that Satya mentioned was like, all right, cool. We've had this first wave of things that are Copilot, and they've done a lot for people, right? They help them code faster, they help them write faster, they help them, interrogate data faster and get insights, all this kind of stuff. This is great. Now we're going to do V2 stuff. What does that mean, right? And that actually directly kind of intersects with the things that I'm interested in and I work on, and whether that's at work or whether it's outside of work.
Right.
And what does V2 actually mean in that context? Well, like a year and a half ago, I'd say, right? There's this big move as a part of like the large LLM vendors, if you want to call it that, right?
Yeah.
Like OpenAI, Claude, as you mentioned, right, Kevin?
Yeah.
They all moved
Perplexity
to,
and yeah.
right, Perplexity, all these folks. There's this big move towards this thing called function calling and tool use.
Yeah.
Right. And what that permitted these LLMs the capability to do was they could now go through and talk to services. Right. So before it was just like chat with it, it gives you stuff, chat with it, it gives you stuff. Right. Where we're going, where we started going a year and a half ago was we're going to give you some things. You need to figure it out. We're not going to tell you too much about it. You just got to figure it out. LLM. Turns out LLMs are actually good at figuring things out.
Right.
You give it an API spec and it can discover the API spec and treat it like language and interact with all aspects of it, which means effectively, like you can throw it into an integration and now you have an LLM ordering your pizza for you without actually ever picking up the phone.
Right.
Because it's calling into, a VoIP protocol thing and it's generating text, it's converting that to audio and it has access to your payment information. It's like, it's opened us this incredible universe of, I don't even know how many different permutations and applications now.
Right.
And that move, right, that is kind of sweeping across the industry now is termed to be, the agentic wave, right? So basically, LLMs have moved from just being kind of these sort of single modal applications where you chat and get output back to now, go from there to like multimodal where you can do all kinds of things in terms of video and all that stuff. And now you're going beyond multimodal, which is your, extended multimodal or extensible, where you can actually do totally different things with it, And you can spawn, as an example,
Yeah.
agents that do things for you. And that's kind of the crux of what I'm, working and thinking on right now.
How early on were like obviously I think AI has had a breakout year in 2024. How long, we've talked about this between us, but just for everybody else, how long have you been in like the call it AI, but I know
Yeah.
you've been in the
Whatever AI means.
yeah, whatever AI means. How long have you been in this industry? And like
Yeah.
what did it look like? And for all of like our audience is are like first time founders. What does like the early version of like AI actually look like? And
Yeah.
like and who kind of says that all of this stuff won't work and all of this, and then you just kind of need to persevere through this. I think I believe me, I think you said like you've been in this industry for 15 years
Yeah.
or so or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
Give
of,
the
of
audience
that, I've
some
been doing it
context.
for yeah. So like, you know, I've worked at companies that have pretty storied history in AI, like IBM, everybody knows Watson, Jeopardy, and all that kind of stuff. That feels like lifetimes ago, right? But, if you think about before LLMs kind of came onto the scene, right? We had pretty sophisticated applications of machine learning.
Right.
Google Translate, right? There was everyone who
Yeah.
was talking, still back then, even, right? Like object recognition, things like, oh, like hot dog, not hot dog. I mean, literally, like we're talking Silicon Valley, the LLMs weren't around. We were talking hot dog, not hot dog, right? So, you know, uh, what's another one? Entity classification. So like if you look at legal applications and things like that, before transformers as an architecture and all that stuff came about, there were a lot of ML algorithms and ML applications out there that were quite significant actually, and actually have now been either accelerated or even augmented with LLM related capabilities. But if you look at where did this stuff come from, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like it, LLMs and more fundamentally transformers are um, I would say it's a step function improvement in, NLP, right? And NLP is a very old field. Very old
Right.
in our industry is like, we're talking like, 30, 40 years, right?
Right.
But nevertheless, that's old, right? For our industry, that's not
Yeah.
new.
Yeah.
And so, many of those problems, many of those things for practitioners of ML and NLP, many of those problems that kind of hit at the core of it have not necessarily gone away. LLMs are capable enough that they aren't as bad,
Right.
but they haven't gone away. So one of the things as an example that you're hearing nowadays, right? Like, you have these like billion, multi-billion, trillion parameter, whatever odd models, like
Yeah.
insanely large, right? Hugely massive. And, you're running into the problem of scale. Like, well, wait a minute, how much data is there left for
Right.
the AI algorithms to train on? The answer is, you crawl the web, you pretty much have got every source of publicly available information out there. Historically, ML algorithms got better with the additional training data, but often they also got worse if you didn't actually pay attention. Call that, drift, right?
Yeah.
But now you're running to a totally different class of problems, which is there's no more data. Where do you go, right? And
Right.
actually, interestingly, if you look at some of the permutations of, well, okay, now we ran out of data, right? That's where the ML, classically, we saw some of the challenges with ML. What are we going to do? Some people are like, well, why don't we just come up with synthetic data? Okay, well, we didn't try that before. We don't know what that's going to look like, right? Okay, well, forget about the synthetic data. Why don't we, and this is kind of interesting actually, because there's something happened recently that we can talk about in this context, right? So
Yeah.
let's say you run out of data. What do you do? Well, how do you continue to advance the bar for AI if your focus is no longer in training? And so, if you look at, and this is something a lot of people are talking about right now, O3, right? So about a year ago, people were talking all about like, oh, there was a strawberry model that OpenAI had, and it was behind the scenes and it was incredible. And AGI was around the corner and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was like strawberry, it's like, if you're in the Bay Area, that used to be like
I think there's
a
a book that
radio
I
host.
read to my 2.5-year-old.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Right? Strawberry, right? It's, people just keep parroting it and then it loses its meaning. And here we are a year later from everybody talking about strawberry. And it turns out that O3 has significantly, in some ways, even eclipsed natural human performance on artificial, the AGI evaluation scale, right?
Yeah.
And we're no longer talking about AGI. We're talking about ASI, right?
It's
And what is ASI?
ASI.
Artificial super intelligence.
Super intelligence. Right.
We're going beyond artificial general intelligence to artificial super intelligence. I'm sorry, Sarah, please go ahead.
Oh, well, I'm just curious, like being inside, a huge company like Microsoft, and these models are getting more complex and better and better, and we're running out of training data. Like, what is the opportunity for a startup in AI? Like, is there any?
Oh my
Should
God.
startups even try to compete? Should they be playing in
Well,
this space?
yeah. So look, this is kind of the interesting thing, right? You look at all these models, they keep getting bigger and bigger. They keep getting more complex. And quite frankly, they keep getting more expensive. That's what's going to happen because we're not optimizing in a real way in the industry. Let's leave aside Microsoft for a second, right? We're not optimizing in the industry for cost.
Right.
We're not optimizing necessarily for compute resources. We're quite literally trying to break the walls down, right? And go as fast as possible. Now, if you are a company, right? Forget about, Microsoft, OpenAI, any of these larger people. Like, you make crackers.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about like Kraft. I'm talking about like, there's a Arizona company that makes crackers and they have a production line and all that kind of stuff. You still have plenty of applications for AI on your factory floor, right? Whether that's in terms of extrusion, right? In terms of the actual mix, whether that's in terms of packaging, whether that's in terms of, and this is, a great thing, warehousing, right? Oh, there are so many of these, honest to God AI applications that have nothing to do, as I mentioned, with artificial superintelligence, artificial general intelligence, artificial, who knows what intelligence. And the reality is that on the ground, the same issues that crept up before with ML extend, right, to some of the applications that we have now. Just because you go bigger and just because you do things like, for example, add a thinking step and all that kind of stuff, you make more general purpose stuff and you make the general purpose stuff more capable. But people aren't necessarily always looking for general purpose stuff, and that's not necessarily what changes your life.
So think about, like, as a startup founder, you might want to think about more specifically what problems you can solve with AI rather than trying to boil the ocean. Like, if there's a very specific industry that you become an expert in or problem, that would be kind of the way to focus, because the Microsofts of the world are not focused on, as cracker shop manufacturing.
Or like automating warehouses that
Are you talking your book, Kevin?
I may be talking my book, and I wanted to put you both on the spot. I had a big week and announced kind of my company. What we're doing is automating warehouses through robotics. And I'm going to put you both on the spot because also, Sarah, you have not invested yet either. You're one of the only people in our group that has not invested.
No money.
I have an angel list UV that you can invest as little as $1,000. I would love confirmation from both of you to do that right now on the spot. We're 19 minutes in, and anybody who's made it this far is a fan, hopefully, of the pod. DM me. This is not a general solicitation. I don't know all the legal words, blah blah blah. But I'll send you a link. But will you both put in at least $1,000 for the next OpenAI?
Well, outside of any capacity I have separately from a Microsoft employee that has nothing to do with my employment whatsoever, I am 100% a supporter of you, Kevin. So
thank you.
You got that.
Sarah, you could say this, just you're a supporter and you do not have to actually say that you're going to invest.
my next $1,000 on intro are going to you. They're going to invest in your startup. This
All
is
right.
why I do what I do, just so I
Okay.
can invest in you, Kevin.
All right. All right. I love it. We're this podcast has already paid for itself. But I think to your point, Raj, I think that it's exactly what it is. I think we're only scratching the surface of what AI is, right? Like you look at these massive like computing shifts, whether that be the personal computer, whether that be the internet, whether that be the mobile, like nobody could have predicted uh, that you can actually summon a car to drive you around San Francisco with your mobile phone. And that was been built on many different layers of technology. And
That's right.
AI is going to be the exact same thing for all of these different industries.
Yeah.
And also just for general work, I would actually love to hear it from you, Sarah, as far as like how you personally use AI today yourself and within the company, just maybe to do kind of work. But like, what are your kind of thoughts going forward with Winnie, which is a childcare marketplace? What do you where do you kind of see this for yourself?
Yeah, this was one of my other questions I wanted to ask Raj. Like, for startup founders, like, forget about incorporating AI into your product. Like, people will do that and will use AI to solve lots of problems. But to run your business, like, what are the tools that startup founders should definitely be using at this point to make things faster, better, more efficient? Like, I I feel like, every day, like, some investor or something is like, "Have you checked out this AI tool that claims to do X, Y, and Z?" And then I try it and it sucks. And I'm like, "Well, this is kind of a waste of time." Uh, I'm like, I mean, I use ChatGPT a ton, but like, a lot of these tools, they have a lot of promise, like, "We're gonna replace all your sales reps and, you don't even need to, do any prospecting because we do all the prospecting for you." Like, but then it doesn't work when we try to apply it to our industry and our data. And I've tried some of these, like, we actually make phone calls for you and we sound like real humans. Like, no, they don't. It's terrible.
Right.
Uh, so I'm just curious, like, are there the coding tools seem like they're ready for prime time and they're helpful. And obviously people use
Sure.
ChatGPT and the other competitors to that. Um, what else should
Claude,
we be using?
Copilot.
What's ready? But those are all like in the vein of ChatGPT. Like they're, you test what you get in Perplexity and Claude and ChatGPT and you compare the answers but like what else is there? What should founders definitely be using at this point?
Yeah. So I guess what's kind of interesting is because you brought up like automating prospecting and like that kind of thing. So in a former lifetime, I actually used to be in sales. And so I know I know what you're talking about very intimately well. And I've used a lot of those tools actually. And you're right. Like many of them. In fact, right. Let's think about it. So we've talked about three different categories of things. First is stuff that accelerates your knowledge work, right? Coding, writing documents, PowerPoints. Okay, there's a class of stuff that's there. There's all the copilots for all the copilot, and you can copilot. Okay, so there's that, right? Um, there are automated things that kind of try to replace human activities. Okay, right? Human-ish sounding things. Okay,
Right.
let's put that bucket.
Right.
And then there's like this other class of things, which is like I call it kind of personal productivity. In a way, it's like I look at what I find helpful. If I'm a founder and I don't have a lot of resources, and I used to be one, but that's we don't need to talk about that right now. Um, but the one thing I always wish I had, which I can see was super beneficial at these large companies, like virtual assistant, right? Or like an EA on steroids, right? Like, I really wish I had my own chief of staff, EA kind of thing that organizes my calendar and my life and take care of all of that kind of stuff. That kind of thing is really helpful if you can stitch it together properly in your workflow, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Something
Right.
that plugs into your calendar, something that plugs into your email, something that plugs into, your Slack or your Teams, right? And can do all of those things at once and maintain context. Like, that's kind of a thing that I really want, but you have to stitch a bunch of tools together to get there. And honestly, if you can do it, it helps. It works a lot, but it's not easy. Now, this other class of stuff that we're talking about, which is like automating prospecting and talking to people and doing code calling,
Yeah. Not there yet.
like I'm just speaking from like a human perspective. Like, I know how to work these like customer service trunk trees pretty well.
Yeah.
I, I'm not, I'm not that sophisticated with it. You just press buttons to get past it. People pick up on stuff that doesn't sound like it's human.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's going to be a while to go before we can get there. So,
Yeah.
I would say if you focus kind of on accelerating your personal productivity, and
Yeah.
the Copilot stuff, like all the knowledge work stuff, that's going to be there. But this is kind of like the next gold mine, I feel like, if you're like a scrappy founder, start figuring out how you can build your own chief of staff so that you can spend less time worrying about the nuts and bolts of the stuff that honestly isn't really adding that much value. Like I'm not going to lie, right? Like, finding a meeting time is kind of the
Jesus.
most, honestly, track how much time you spend in a week figuring out how to organize meetings. It is an incredible amount of time. And if you have
Wow.
an EA or chief of staff, boom,
That's
that
kind of
goes
like
away.
a big company problem. Like, I don't
No,
spend
it's
time on
not, Sarah. That's still
the only
not.
people that is like for internally, like
Oh, internally, sure, but
Internally,
easy because
externally,
we're a
yeah.
small team and we don't have meetings, but externally it's like, yeah, like it's more convincing our customers and our prospects to meet with us. Not like, and like I don't have access to their calendar. It's like, make this a
Right.
priority. But I feel like that's also more of it's sales and it's success. It's like
Yeah.
they don't feel like it's a priority. They're not making the time. It's not really a scheduling issue.
So
Yeah.
for founders, I'll give two concrete, and this is for I am technical, but this would be maybe for the non-technical founder as well. So one use case I did, we were looking to figure out where in the country we should launch our next warehouse based on a lot of publicly available data. And I was like, okay, build me an actual like heat map of like all of the e-commerce shipments that are
Mhm.
going, and let me basically decide and make me a map and show me like where would be the optimal place. Literally did that in Claude, and this is me not coding for years, and it spit me out something that I could actually, and we actually made a decision on our next location based on that. Another one I used ChatGPT a lot for is just brainstorming. It's like your like person that you're in, and I don't know if you guys have the same thing, but I'll have like crazy ideas, and I'll wake up at 4 a.m. and I'm just like, what about this idea? I had this idea, I like found something off. A question that I got asked from an investor was like, because I'm taking on Amazon FBA, shout out my new company that people should hit me up about again. And it's like, how much does Amazon FBA actually ship out? And so what I did is I put in all of the different earning reports of all of the public companies, UPS, Amazon, Shopify, everything. I was like, here's all of the data that's publicly available. What percentage of e-commerce shipments is Amazon FBA actually shipping? It actually turns out to be a lot less than you would think. You like, I'm sure both of you are big Amazon users. It actually turns out to be only 12% that
Wow.
Amazon actually ships out. And so through just putting a bunch of information in, and yeah, you need to massage it and you need to talk back to it a little bit and point it. Initially, it was like, if I asked that question, it would not be able to do that. But here's some data, here's some more data, here's some more data, here's some more data. What is the actual number? And so those are two things that I'm kind of using it myself personally. And I know the rest of the team is using it for similar things, but I think coding is the number one piece. And I hear nothing bad said about Copilot so far, except for when me and Raj talk behind the scenes and how it doesn't work at all and all those things. I'm totally joking. Copilot's great.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the other thing as a founder, right? This is not me saying that I have the itch or anything like that, but it doesn't go away. It's like not only is it becoming easier and easier to uncover some of those opportunities, like going back to what you were saying, right, Sarah, about, how are you supposed to use AI as a founder and what are those things and all that kind of stuff? Like the main issue that I find is that keep cropping up is everybody keeps talking about the capabilities of AI, right? And nobody seems to realize that, as a founder, your hardest problem is not talking about the capabilities of your technology and what it can accomplish.
Yeah.
It's talking about what problems you can solve and how well you can solve them. And actually it's, in terms of the tools that are available, like Kevin, you literally just said this, right? Like that was a perfect example of, if I'm a founder and I'm trying to be scrappy and I'm trying to use this thing to do something, help me put together this information and then figure out, number one, like what is the actual problem statement here, right? Because you as the founder have a perspective that's unique in being immersed, right? You're in founder mode. Nobody else kind of has the level of perspective and eyesight that you have to narrow the scope of the problem. And if you can come down and coalesce on that problem statement faster than anybody else, then you can do the next thing, which is use AI to help come up with those solutions, right? And like, fine, right? People say, okay, fine. You know what the problems are. You know what the statement are. Dude, look at all these tools out there that help you close that gap, right? Like helping your engineer, the one engineer or whatever that you have, that you've been able to scrap together money to hire, code like 50% faster, gives you 50% more runway.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's a real honest to God thing. So not only can you like identify the problem and the solution faster, you also have tangible benefits that come from actually implementing these things in your workflow in the house. And to me as a founder, or no, excuse me, as an ex-founder, right? Like that's kind of what whets the appetite, where it's like, cool, sure, AI can do all this stuff, but there are all these non-sexy problems that people don't think about that are still suffering basically day to day. And I can get the solution faster. And how do I do that? Like that to me is super exciting.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have one more kind of technical question for you.
Shoot.
Where do you ultimately see, so we have a bunch of horses in this race, right? I would obviously call out OpenAI. Obviously Microsoft is a big partner to them.
Yep.
We also have it seems like X or Twitter.
X?
Grok.
Grok.
I feel like they're tier 2 here. Like
sure,
Google,
but all the different
whatever,
right? We have Claude, we have Perplexity, we have a bunch of different people here that are spending tens of billions of dollars,
hundreds of billions in some cases,
hundreds of billions of dollars. There's the famous article where the $300 billion like problem, like what is like where is all this money ultimately going to go? What do you think from like your personal, you're not talking on behalf of Microsoft, but you're talking on behalf of yourself. Where do you think this ultimately goes? And also I like to think back to like, okay, before Google, there was a ton of different search engines, right? They all did their own different thing. And ultimately Google kind of won out and they just dominated. Do you think it's
Right.
going to be the same thing? What do you think is going to happen? Is it going to get different flavors? What do you kind of predict?
So I think that's a good question. I think that this happens in phases, right? Like, I think that we're in the early innings of customer behavioral changes and adapting to AI. Like, the big cultural shifts that I've seen technologically happen when it is accessible to folks that have no awareness or prior understanding or context and can still get the value out of it. Like, the stories that stick out of my mind are things like the 3-year-old that knows how to open the iPhone and knows how to navigate through the apps, right? I heard a story the other day that was actually legitimate where there are, Kevin, you and I are going to face this at some point, but what I don't know if you have kids, Sarah, but like
Sarah
apparently
does.
kids,
Yeah,
yeah,
she literally runs a marketplace for her parents.
oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Wait, are you saying that because I look so young?
Look, I don't, I mean, yes,
Raj,
yes.
say yes.
Oh my gosh.
Say
Why,
yes.
how do you, I don't know how you stick, look at me. I got a gray beard, and
I'm
3
gonna
kids.
I'm
Anyway,
gonna wait. I'm gonna wait till I'm in my 50s to have kids.
there you go. So there was like 10-year-olds using ChatGPT for their homework. They have no prior context or awareness,
Yeah.
of what AI is and all that. But culturally, we're in the early innings of a shift of adaptation to technology. Fine, right? The way that the way that those coalesce, those have historically coalesced, is the platforms that are most user accessible tend to basically take take the lion's share of everything, right? Apple, the iPhone, right? Google, the ease of simplicity that's associated with the search bar,
Right.
right? I fully expect that those kinds of things, once we get into late stages of maturity, right, we're going to adapt more to the simplicity and ease of use of integrations of those technologies. And I think we're in the early innings of that. To me, honestly, that's just the natural waveform of where things are going to go. Now, that is going to happen whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
I don't think that, we as lay people are going to influence that in any meaningful way, because we're talking about like large titanic shifts in terms of people and money and all that kind of stuff. What's more interesting to me, to be honest, and this is personally, right, is I see 2 shifts that are kind of cresting on the horizon, that, people aren't really paying attention to right quite yet because it's too early. Like the first one, and Kevin, you and I have talked about this, but like,
Yeah.
this is going to be the real difference maker. Is everyone today, behind the scenes is racing to get the first, functional, capable, what we call foundation model. And, just yesterday, Jensen on stage at CES was like,
Yeah.
we released Cosmos World, the new foundation model. And what is a
Right.
foundation model for folks at home, right? Foundation model is you got a robot, right? You have, I don't know how, if you have Alexa at home and all that kind of stuff, right? Like the main thing that I want is I want the robot to do things. And I want the robot, make the robot do the things. A foundation model takes the transformer architecture and the concepts behind it and applies it to the physical realm, and generalizes the purpose of interaction between, as an example, like controllers and physical inputs and telemetry and all the like, for the application of things like robotics.
Right.
And that is really where the hardcore research is going on right now. And if that wave crests in the right way and hits the right inflection point, all of our lives are going to transform, full stop.
Right. Right.
And then that to me, is like, yes, we're going to continue with all these like crazy models and all that kind of stuff. But what's behind that to me is the foundation models. And I think you're already starting to see that. And then the next thing, just to kind of put a cap on it, behind that wave that I'm seeing, is, and this is really like decades out, but in our world, that may be eons, but it's still happening right now and people aren't really paying that much attention to it, is, quantum AI. Right? Because we're starting to run into the limits physically of all of the kind of capabilities that we have in terms of hardware. And as soon as we make those things usable
Right.
in meaningful ways, we start talking about step transformations, like step functions of improvement beyond 48 transforms. And that's when things going to get really crazy. Right.
Yeah, I really think about this also. For my kids as well. Like what ideally, like obviously they could do whatever they want. I was fortunate enough to like I remember when I was, I don't know, 12 or 13 whatever, getting like an IBM PC and just getting dialing up and just making games and all that kind of stuff, and fortunate enough to get a CS degree and kind of end up in the programming world. I honestly think like right now I would really point my kids into more of like the AI slash robotics piece, because if you look at this, if you look at the sheer number of actual like workers, whether you are thinking about like at a restaurant or in fulfillment, shout out to my company again, or drivers, right? Like that are either going to be delivering your food or making your food or doing all of these different tasks that um that really can be automated. I really think
Mm.
that's going to be the
Can I just
future.
say what I want?
Yes.
So
What do you
I
want?
got that. I finally, caved and got that robot vacuum, the Robo Rock, and it's like it's amazing because
Wait,
like
the
every
Robo Rock? You mean the rum the
I know
Roomba?
I have a Robo Rock. It's called.
Nice.
Um,
Is that better
and
than the Roomba?
yeah, this was like I got the like top of the line one.
Oh,
And
damn.
it's awesome, like, it mops, it vacuums, I just set it every night, I tell it to do its thing, but now I'm like, I want that for, like, wiping my countertops, I want that for, like, putting away the toys and all the things, like, couldn't I just show a robot around, show it where everything goes, and then tell it at night, like, do the pickup routine and put everything away? Like,
See
it's not that hard.
this is where I think that people like don't truly understand. Everybody is into this like humanoids, even
Yeah,
Elon, right? Like
I want I want
the
that
I,
robot that straightens up.
Jarvis.
I understand that the concept of having like a person that is just like robotic makes a lot of sense, but you need to actually have, and I'm dealing with this on the day-to-day basis. Shout out for doing my new company. But like you need purpose built robots. So like why Roomba
Well,
is
the
the
purpose would be to pick up the things and put them in the cabinet
exactly,
where they
but
go.
is it what I'm basically saying is I'm going against the humanoid version of what everything needs to be. It doesn't need to be the human form. It doesn't need to
No,
have
no,
wheels or
just like a
whatever. And
robo rack, but it can pick stuff up and put it in the
ju-
cabinet, and then I could set one on the countertops, and it could
yeah,
fly countertop to countertop and wipe.
exactly. And for like purpose built things, just like in the defense industry, like the the next kind of evolution is not going to be an army of humanoid robots with guns. It's going to be drones that literally can just
Right, yeah.
like
I don't care what form, like, what it looks like, I just needed to do the thing.
but people get caught up on just like, "Oh, this is the way things have been done before, and like let's just accelerate this version of it,
Right,
i.e.
right,
the humanoid, which is
right.
not the actual right way to do it. It's the exact same thing that you're saying. So it's the dishwasher, right? You don't want a human to actually like wash your dishes manually. It's
Right,
actually like
right,
putting your dishes inside of a thing, and it spins out water really hot, and the same thing
right.
goes for everything. And so that's why I am very passionate about like the humanoid robot example is the most terrible example ever. Sorry, Elon. I know you're listening to this, but
You're going to
that
get a
is not
tweet.
going to be the thing.
That's so
Also,
funny.
a washer dryer that folds your clothes at the end would be great. Like,
Yeah,
these
yeah,
things don't feel far off, like, why can't we
they're
just do
not.
it? Why is
They're,
everyone working on, like, another LLM and not a dryer that folds your clothes?
my personal thing is I don't think a lot of people are really interested in doing that. Like for me personally, shout out to my new company. I've been in this industry for the last 12 years, and this problem has been bothering me so much. And I'm just so passionate about solving it because I'm stubborn and I have chips on my shoulders and I have something to improve to who knows who. And I'm just like deep in logistics. I'm like, I'm going to make the best logistics company ever. But I don't think people wake up and they're like, hey, let's make a folding robot uh, that will do it faster and
Well,
cheaper and all of that.
but to your point, Kevin, and this is where I think like you're going to start to see some of the transformations, right? Like when those capabilities start catching up, like when foundation models get real, when you have a general purpose robotics model where it can take input, like, hey, go pick up the toys, right? And it has a robotic arm that's purpose built to do those things. As an example, it has a receiver or all whatever it is. And it can take that input and then use its physical instruments and implements to
Yeah.
go and do those things, which we're not at right now, right? When you have those kind of general purpose building blocks, right?
Yeah.
That's when you're going to start seeing the Cambrian explosion of applications. Like today, to your point, right, Sarah, like the reason why you're seeing all these folks pop up around, the chat GPT for X, and Y, right, is because you have these LLM building blocks that you can then tailor and customize and whatever.
Right.
And that's what's prompted this, spread, basically.
Right.
We don't have that yet necessarily for robotics, but that's not to say that it's not far away.
Right.
Right. Like,
Well, this is our call out to build that, please, founders.
Yeah, and I think that what Raj and everybody in the AI world is building is just this foundation that is going to enable the creation of all
Yeah.
of these different application specific um, uh, companies that solve, to Raj, to your point, like actual customers' problems versus just being very open, and you could do kind of anything with it. And there's going to be very specific problems that are solved, which I think for anybody listening, like that's where you should be focusing your time on. Like, don't start another LLM. Like, for one, that's going to be very expensive, and you have a lot of competition. But like, use AI for both internally, and also thinking about how you could leverage it to be a better solution for whatever industry that you are in. And I think we all agree it's not going to be the SDR right now that's going to be robocalling everybody. Maybe one day. I don't know. Do you guys think that there's going to be one day that we're going to have it? You'll have a team of SDRs that are all robotic, and they'll convince somebody on the phone to actually buy something from you, or do you think that's like gotta be that's a human touch kind of thing?
I mean, look, have you guys used Notebook LM?
Yes.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yes.
And yeah, like it doesn't seem that hard. Like you can have a conversation back and forth with ChatGPT and be like, sell me something. Like, here's all the things you have to know about the thing you're selling. Now sell it to me. And it can do a decent job. But these like phone calling things are they're too slow to take the audio input and respond. And they don't seem as good as ChatGPT.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know. Maybe some of the tools, like I've seen some demos, some tech demos that look pretty good, but they're still tech demos.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not, it's not that far. We'll see.
Yeah, I don't
You know
think
what I
it's
mean?
that far. I think it's just like,
Yeah.
especially like the
It's not there
SDR
yet.
function of just like set up a meeting. Like all you have
Right.
to do is set the meeting. But yeah, it's just they're not quite ready for prime time.
So
But
I have one last question. Let's end it on this. Raj, you obviously have a very prominent role at Microsoft, one of the hottest AI companies and one of the hottest products. I'm actually just curious, how many inbounds do you get from other companies, right? Like, your skill set is obviously very unique. You have been in this game for 15, 20 years or however long. I'm curious as kind of a startup founder that has not been in these larger companies, as far as like the amount of poaching that is out kind of going on. And how many recruiters are you turning down every single day? Because literally, like AI is going to be the next generation, and everybody understands all the previous generations. And if you're like on top of one of the most successful companies, you must get like hit up all the time for this.
I mean, honestly, it just kind of feels like noise. Like, so part of me has thought about deleting LinkedIn just because it's like, people, it's just like, like it's fine. Right. People are excited, but the flip side. So I guess to answer that question, one of the things that I saw in the last year or so, is that based off of, the sheer number of layoffs, the number of talented people that I know that got laid off.
Right.
I mean, even 2 years ago, even I was almost subject to, a layoff, right? Like that's when, our team kind of got cut. When I was part of Bonsai, it actually got cut in Microsoft, and I didn't know if I was going to have a job. Like there are a lot of really, really talented people
Right.
that are still out there, and so I think what has happened is two things, right? I think there's been this like really big wave of excitement. And I think since that wave of excitement has now kind of hit its peak in a way, right? That has trickled into job postings and respectively, like it has trickled into recruiters. But what it hasn't matured into is like people are just trying to hire folks to do AI stuff. And many
Right.
people have kind of pivoted into being an AI person, or whatever that means. And quite frankly, these days, I don't even know what AI person means anymore. Like I
Yeah.
legitimately don't even know.
Right.
So like, there will be, I've seen not only like a lot of like job requisitions and people reach out and stuff like that, which are like, hey, we need somebody to figure out our AI strategy. Like literally, like I cannot tell you how many times a day I see product manager AI. Like, what are you talking about? Please stop. It's ridiculous. It really is. But then on the other flip side of it, right, you have all these, really capable, really talented folks. And quite frankly, like, even if they didn't have all of that context, they could probably end up doing those jobs.
Mhm.
And so, like, I think, where we are in terms of the job market, and this is me kind of speaking personally too, is like, look, there's enough information out there that if you can differentiate yourself as someone who, like I was saying earlier, knows how to use AI to solve problems,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
identifying the problems and finding the solutions to them. It honestly doesn't like, maybe I'm, kind of removing my domain expertise out of the equation for a second, but like, it honestly doesn't really matter that much if you have context or not, because you can demonstrate that you've accomplished something of tangible value,
Right.
And I see a lot of folks who are actually now who kind of been laid off and stuff, that's what they're pivoting toward. They're showcasing how they use AI for those things. Now, I've had the fortune of being a part of, some of these waves kind of on the forefront, but that's not to say necessarily that nobody else can participate. A lot of people can participate, right? They're
Right.
democratized by definition.
Right.
And so, for me, where I'm kind of trying to think career wise and that kind of stuff, just, personally, is like, okay, well, I'm not a selfish person. I don't need a forward expertise. I don't need to toot my own horn about what I've done and where I've been and where I am and all that kind of stuff. What I do want to do though, is I want to push the envelope. I always want to be a part of like what's next. And
Mhm.
I think that is a healthy thing, right? For anybody who's in any of those positions, and AI helps you bridge that gap, but it also doesn't necessarily need to be just AI, right? Like I'm talking about all this kind of like, agents and all this kind of, who cares? You know, like you could be that cracker PM, be the cracker PM. People will hire you. You know what I'm saying? I'm not even exaggerating. Like,
No.
So good.
All right. Well, let's end it on that. Raj,
yeah.
it was a pleasure uh,
Thank you.
to have you on. Thanks everybody for listening. And we will
And
catch
send us
you.
that link to invest, Kevin.
Yes, I will, of course. And hit me up, anybody on Twitter and my DMs if you've made it this far in this podcast. Thanks everybody for listening, and catch you next time. Bye bye.